Hey, you have Patrick Findaro here, co-founder at Visa Franchise Embedded Biz. Excited to have on Angie Rupert, who for, I don't know, 4 or 5 years has been a strategic partner of Visa Franchise, numerous clients together on the E2 Visa side, 100% approval rate. Clients are super happy with their service. The follow-up, getting the E2 Visa as fast as possible for the clients. And Angie and I are just going to talk all things E2 Visa for those that are looking to apply for the E2 Visa in 2023. So Angie, thanks for joining us for our live stream today.
Thanks, Patrick. This is very exciting. Together again. It's been a while, but I'm thrilled. Yeah, this is great.
Yeah. Well, you've been working with a lot of our colleagues at Visa Franchise, so I've been here. I've just been more in the background, but thankfully we have a great team at Visa Franchise that is dealing with prospective clients, the actual clients. But you have my assurance that we're checking bi-weekly, every week, if not quite 2 times a week, on tons of cases. I think at this current time we have over 60 E2 Visa investors that are at different stages of the process, from selecting an investment or just waiting for their visa. So
that's right. Yeah, and a couple of them are with me, so that's great. Exciting.
And tell me, so we were talking a little bit before we hit live in terms of just like consulate processing. And I know Barbados has just recently started opening up. And we've had dual nationals that acquired a Grenadian citizenship through investment that are finally able to get consulate interviews there in Barbados after what seems like 2.5 years. Yeah. What else are you seeing around the world in terms of processing times, and what consulates are moving fast?
So as we were talking, I just filed somebody in Melbourne earlier this week who has an interview in about a week and a half, which was shocking to me. That's even faster than 2019. So Melbourne, I can happily report that Melbourne is doing really well. I had the same experience in Perth maybe 11 months ago or so. Australia's kind of come and gone and different things all along the way, but Australia seems to be doing really well. Canada's a very popular place to file. Obviously, lots of Canadian E2s. Canada's doing okay. They're doing okay. There's kind of a way to, you kind of have to finagle a little bit, but you can generally get it. I always tell people about 8 to 12 weeks or so, depending on how aggressive you are with kind of taking cancellations and things. UK, another major hub for E2s, they're about where they've always been. So, there are some smaller places, as you mentioned, like Barbados doesn't do the volume that, Toronto or London does, or Sydney or Perth, but coming back online. Same with Amman, Jordan. That was another client that I had waiting. They got an interview scheduled after about 6 months. So, at least the wheels are slowly turning. Oddly, it's, the places that don't do a ton of E2s are actually still really slow, which you would think, they don't have that many, like we can speed right through. So these are still a little bit up in the air in some areas, but overall, 90% of the consulates are back to something that sounds reasonable and manageable to most. Yeah.
And so if we're going into 2023, someone that hasn't yet invested in a business, what are some items they need to definitely hit in terms of investment amount, the business plan, the type of business, preparing their petition for 2023? How can they make your job easy and get the E2 visa approved the first time, and as easy as possible for everyone involved?
Yeah. So, those are great questions. So we really take a very step-by-step approach with all clients in order to do exactly what you said, be super efficient. The reality is when someone comes to us that's kind of, oh, hey, I'm thinking about getting an E2, there are many, many documents that we need. And we want to let everybody know up front, these are all the documents we're going to need. But let's take a step back and just work on step 1. Get step 1 done, then step 2. So we talk every 3 weeks to make sure that they get through every single step in the process and not an overwhelming process. just work on these 3 documents, get them, then we're going to move on to the next, then the next, then the next. It tends to move much faster that way. So just kind of staying with that kind of program. But as far as things that they're going to need, investments amounts, things like that, I mean, I think the old standby still at this point still generally holds true, which is about 100,000 as like a very kind of basic service-based kind of business, and it goes up from there, right? I always give everybody the analogy of like, if you want to open a Cadillac dealership in the middle of Manhattan, you're going to need a few $1,000,000. If you want a tax preparation firm in Lincoln, Nebraska, probably 100 will do it. So it really depends a lot on that business, but I would not, for my clients at least, I never recommend spending less than about 100. I just feel, especially, yeah.
Sorry, go on.
No, just with kind of interest rates, inflation, different things. So 100 now is not what 100 was even a year ago, right? And so really dipping below that amount, you might be a little bit on thin ice. Again, it really depends. But you have to understand that the person that makes that decision is the person you're standing in front of doing the interview. And you and I and the client, and nobody knows who that person's going to be. And if in their mind, I've just done 4 E2 interviews in a row and they all spent $250 and now here you come with 75, that's where you're at. So keeping all of those things in mind.
So we have a few clients that are in the process of investing in a home care business. And for those that aren't familiar, there's a ton of home care franchises. We've interviewed franchisees, franchisors. Effectively, you're finding caregivers, whether it's medical or non-medical, to help mostly elderly patients at their homes. So it's almost like a marketplace. You find the caregivers, you find the elderly patients, you place them, and it's not a business that requires a huge upfront investment. Say the franchise fee is $40K. You're going to have a very basic office. Some allow you even to work from home. Then after that, there's the technology, but there's not a ton of cost. So say you've already spent $60K, $70K. You also travel to the US to investigate the opportunity. You have our fee. I don't know what other business plan writer fees, and you're at like the 70, 80K mark, but the franchisor is telling you that, hey, you need to have $50,000 working capital to pay these caregivers until you hit break even. Does that 50K go to the 100,000, or is it just the money that you've spent and the government wants to see that you've spent 100,000?
Right. So it's really receipts, right? That's what they're going to tell you. And many of the consulate websites actually will say that if you get on them. Some of them don't. Some of them are very poorly written. But that's really what they're looking for. So they're looking for the receipts. So whatever the receipts are, that's what you've invested, right? Not the money. Because I get that question a lot, and I'm sure you do as well. Like, oh, well, I've got 150. I'll just move it over to the account, and then we can apply, right? Like, well, you do need to move it to the account. That's a good first step. That's a great first step. And now we've got to spend it. So we're looking for the receipts. What is the total of the receipts? That's what we count as part of the investment. Yeah.
Well said. And for those clients that have they're trying to get to the 100K level, we've seen if your business justifies a company car, a van, we've seen that count towards the 100K and then shoot the client up to 110,000, 120,000. A lot of 100%. Service businesses whether it's painting or you're going to the business, you're going to the client's home, you're going to need a vehicle, and vehicles in the US can range anywhere from 5K to 50K plus. So
holy macaroni,
easy way to kind of pass that $100,000 threshold.
Yeah. 100%. And I will say, so this is what I tell people about vehicles. I have definitely used vehicles as part of it. Definitely in the way that you said. So if we use a vehicle, I usually say it should be part of the business plan, meaning driving is part of what people pay you to do. Right. So, and that is, so if you're having something like the home health that you mentioned, or let's say it's a cleaning service, or let's say it's whatever. So you have to go at that. That's part of the service, right? Like, hey, we charge $100 for these consultations or whatever, or we charge you however much a day to come to your house and do X, Y, and Z, or, or there's other stuff that's maybe even more obvious. Like, oh, I have a construction company. Well, we got to carry all of this stuff from here to there, and it's got to be a truck, right? So because we've got all of this paint and whatever. So if it's part of the business plan, then I normally will include it. I always say too, add that, wrap it or put a sign on the side or whatever. And then that really shows like, this is not, and especially if you have, the Mercedes Sprinter vans or you have like a big truck. I mean, this is not something you would drive to the grocery store or the movies. I mean, it's going to be pretty self-explanatory, But if you have more of like what we were just talking about, home health or something like that, you could also have a Toyota Camry to do that, right? But really, that's where I say wrap it or get
put
like
the logo on, make it super clear. Right. It's going to help you get more clients.
That's right.
Helps you get the visa, right. Helps you get more clients.
That's right. And it's part of the business plan. And as far as the expense that you talked about, I mean, obviously, the sky's the limit. It's like, how much does it cost to have a wedding? I don't know. That's going to be on you. Same with the car. But I always tell people too, listen, you can lease it and that's fine, but only the lease payments you've already made are going to count. So if you really need, hey, we need another 30,000 something, write the check for $30,000 for that new Camry or whatever it is that you're buying, then we include it. So it's part of the business plan. It has some sort of marketing, advertising as well, and whatever you've already paid. Yeah.
And then what are you telling clients? Because we have this every day at Visa franchise where they don't want to fully commit the business, the investment before applying for the E2 visa, or how do they? Yeah. If God forbid they're denied and they don't want to apply again, and we've had a couple clients that were denied the first time out of 500 plus. They all the ones that reapplied got it eventually, but God forbid they tried twice, they still don't have it. How do they recoup some of that money? What do you advise? How do you walk through clients with that?
Well, here's the reality. You mentioned kind of the statistics, right? So yeah, denials happen. They do. It is not super common. So I let everyone know that. Like, it's not super common. I don't let anybody go to an interview that I think might get denied. Now, I have had a client denied that was shocking to me because I felt like they met everything, so that does happen out of all the cases I've done. And I've had a couple that had some problems that we had talked about and whatever, and they had some problems. One of them had a drug trafficking conviction, so there are things like that.
The cases we've had where there's been denials, it's almost exclusively not having the intent to go back to their home country.
Right.
Yes. Related to the business and can kind of be a cop out for the consulate officer just to deny the case, maybe because of some security issue or something else that's going on in the background.
And you don't know. And the unfortunate part is neither does the attorney, and we never will. We just have to kind of.
If the client's already gotten a B1, B2, like for example, if someone is dialing in from Pakistan and they already have a B1, B2, I'm very confident the E2 process is going to go smoothly. But if they've never gotten a U.S. visa in the past, and our experience with hundreds of cases, it's been more difficult. And I don't see 2023 being any easier for someone that's never got a U.S. visa, where you're applying for the first time. It's going to make we'll do it, but it's going to make the process harder. That's what we've seen.
Yeah, I think. Well, geez, it's so individual by individual, right? So sometimes it's really difficult to say. I understand what you're saying, though. So basically what you're saying is they've already kind of been vetted by the United States government, right? By the Department of State to say, all right.
It's like we can check off on the person. There's the business and the person. Yeah. Visa franchise, we can only control the business. Your job's harder. Right. You're doing the person and the business. But I see if they've already gotten the B1, B2, or they already have some visa, usually the person side is going to be easier for the consulate officer to kind of get past that. And then it's like, okay, let's focus on the business.
Yeah. And I think that you're right. And a lot of it, I actually did an interview with an ex-consular officer who did E2s in Ciudad Juarez and did E2s in London. And, so a lot of it will have to do, unfortunately, with what country you're in. That's the reality, right? Second reality is a lot of it, and she even mentioned this, they're trained because they do so many interviews in a day. They don't have a lot of time to talk with people.
Two consulate pros in their Ciudad Juarez, I guess, is now split with Mexico City in terms of volume.
That's right.
But in Prime, we're doing thousands of cases a year.
She said that they would do, now these are not E2s, these are all, but she said they were responsible for 100 to 400 interviews every day.
That's wild.
So
yeah.
I was like, are there even 400 minutes in a day? Like, I'm just like, wait. So she's like, there are a lot of B1, B2s, border crossing. That's like the Mexico-America thing. So if you're not Mexican, that doesn't make any sense to you. But they do a lot. And in London, they were responsible for 25 to 100 a day. So you do the math on how long they take on these things. So they're trained when you walk up to do a real assessment. Whoa, what's this person about visually, right? They're trained for that. And she gave a really interesting example, which is kind of the opposite of what you think. She said this guy came up. He wanted to do his business was a tattoo parlor. And yeah. But he was dressed a little too professionally. You know what I mean? Because she's like, we expected a tattoo guy, So there's that kind of thing. But the opposite is also true, right? Like, oh, I'm going to be doing like financial services for high net wealth individuals, whatever. And then you come up in a tank top. So there's that kind of thing as well. In the way you answer questions, right? Just like any kind of job interview or any person you've ever met. Are they confident? Do they know the answers? Do they seem like they know what they're doing in this business? So there's a lot of that goes into these approvals and denials as well. And then, she was mentioning, hey, there's quotas. Like, that's just the reality of it. And also, if you're one way or another, like, well, you've had way too many denials, or you've approved every person that came through here, they will get pulled out and go, you need to come in and justify these 5 visas. Go. So as the attorney, our job is to make sure they have all the documents that we feel meet the requirements, and in a very, very easy to understand, simple layout. That's the real task as the attorney. The client's task is to go in, be able to understand this business, answer questions in a very simple way. So there's kind of 2 parts to it. And, sometimes the consular officer gets just, I won't say bad vibes, like this is a bad person, but bad vibes in like something's
with what they're
not right.
For. Their intention to use this visa doesn't make sense.
That's right. Or there's something that's off. I cannot pinpoint what it is, but something isn't happening here. And, you think, oh, how can someone do that? When you do 200 interviews every day for 2 years, you can assess people pretty quickly. So that's the other half of kind of what we do, and what you do too, right? Is assess people up front. Like, I don't want to put somebody in a position that they're not going to be able to successfully do this. So it doesn't mean that they couldn't get denied. They can, but I'm not going to take somebody on that I'm like, this is not this situation that you've got going here. I don't think it's approvable, right? And so I don't take clients like that. For the clients that I do have, we put their documents into a way, and we provide the documents in such a way that it's very much approvable.
Make it easy.
Yes, make it easy to say yes. That's our goal. Make it easy to say yes, everything we do. And so we over paper sometimes from what other attorneys will do, and even what's maybe approvable, but that way I can sleep at night and the client can sleep at night. That doesn't mean you can't be denied. But if you are denied, something is the consular officer saw something that is very different than what we're seeing, because we make it easy to say yes. That's the goal.
I like it. So, our title of the conversation, how to apply for an E2 visa. Imagine someone's invested the capital. They've worked with you, put together the package, including working with the business plan writer. You have everything in. What's the process from there? Do they reach out to the consulate? Do you schedule the consulate interview from them? Could you kind of walk through the steps of, hey, everything's ready. Now let's apply and get the interview.
Yeah. So and unfortunately, every consulate handles that section differently, which is a super fun way to go about it. But for the most part, so I'll go over what 80% of the consulates do. So we have the whole application put together. we do the DS 160. So in our world, the client fills out the basics. What's your mom's name? Are they in the United States? Things that I don't have any knowledge of. We fill out all of the E2 section, and we review all of their answers with all the documents to make sure that it's the continuity is there, the accuracy is there. We double check passport numbers and expiration dates. We do all of that. Then the client submits that. Then they pay the MRV fee for E2 visas. The MRV fee, which is the government fee, is $205 per person. So if you have a 6-month-old baby, $205. Applicant, $205. Everybody else, each person, $205. So they will log onto the system. We give them go to this link, click that, enter your credit card number, and pay that fee. And then last step is we submit the documents for them in almost every case. Now, if you're listening in or watching in Singapore, Ciudad de Juarez, let's see, where else? Oh, in Madrid, Spain, they still take paper. Don't ask me why. So in that case, we can mail it, or sometimes if the client is there, they prefer to mail. We'll send you the link, print and mail, because it's faster, it's cheaper, whatever, but we can also mail it. We've done both. But in most cases, it's email. So we'll send the email off and say, hey, here we are the attorneys of record for client Steve Smith, and here you go. And so then what happens? Again, every consulate is different. Sometimes we sit back and wait for a few weeks, and then the consulate emails us and goes, hey, tell Mr. Smith that he can get online and schedule his interview. Or sometimes they say, hey, Mr. Smith's interview is on January 17th at 9 a.m. Or sometimes they reach out to the client directly. Or sometimes after you get your DS-160, you can schedule your interview right there. Paris, you can schedule it. So everybody is a little bit different, but we will kind of
not like systemize in their manual, because they have a manual of how they like process visas, but it would make sense if like before like the interview at the consulate, everything else was like systematized.
Yeah, that would be great. That would be awesome, but it is not always that way. And in some instances, you have to pay the fee in person too. Don't ask me why. But for most parts, you can pay the fee online with a credit card, and you email the application. No, the client, here's the link, pay the fee, but we will email the application. And then, whenever we hear back from the consulate, like, oh, here you go, here's the link, click, go in and to the calendar and pick the date that works best for you, or the nearest one, or what have you. And then once they have that interview date, so let's say it is January 17th, we schedule a call with them about 1 week before to go over everything to print out, everything to take, what they usually ask about, what to expect, when to get there, all of those things about 1 week before the interview.
Now you think that would be a basic thing, but I can say from firsthand, a lot of attorneys don't do that. And they just email what to take in, and there's no walkthrough, no interview prep or anything.
Oh, well, okay. Then I guess we do more than others. I did not know that. I assumed that was part of it. We also, yeah, I mean, that's kind of the biggest part. Certainly the paperwork helps. Having it clear and having it thorough helps, which is our job. Having it very, very clear, as simple as humanly possible, easy to say yes. But that interview is what is the real make or break. Right? So understanding what they will likely ask you, again, they can ask you anything, but there are 5 or 6 standard questions that they kind of ask everybody, right? Why did you choose this business?
So
how many employees? Yeah. How many employees do you have? What are your current revenues? What are your revenues going to be like in 5 years? Describe this business to me. These are very common questions. Now, sometimes people get out of left field questions. I've had some people, this one guy I remember, he was in Norway, and I mean, I don't know, 35-year-old guy. He had already had multiple US visas in the past for a variety of things. And he gets up there and they were like, what does your dad do for a living? And he's like, he worked in the oil industry. Well, his dad had worked in Houston, Texas when he was like a child, and he lived on an L1. So he lived in Houston for like, a year or two, more than 20 years past. So every once in a while they will ask kind of bizarre questions like that. And he's like, well, what does my dad do? So sometimes, but for the most part. How do you
manage that? Like, it's like, you don't necessarily want to be offering up information, but you also want to answer direct.
That's right. And that's what I always tell everyone. I mean, it's standard legal advice, right? So if they, answer, obviously be honest. That's crucial.
Yeah.
Be honest, no matter what. Be polite. And most of the time, that's the thing about these interviews. Most of the time, they're very nice. I mean, every once in a while, you'll get somebody that was like, they were kind of short and weird. But for the most part, it's really nice. It's not confrontational. It's not angry. It's just, they're just going to ask you a few questions. They usually smile. They're nice. So you don't need to worry about that. But be polite, be honest, and answer what they're asking. So I tell sometimes I have chatty people like me. I have chatty clients too. And I say, listen, if I were you, I would practice my answer to these 3 questions. They're pretty likely to ask. And, you're excited about your business. You've got all of these things. Their whole world is this application. So if you start mentioning stuff that's outside the application, even though it's totally fine, it's not against any immigration laws or anything, but it throws them off because they're like, oh, wait, this application says this. Now you're saying this other thing. Let's talk a little bit about that other thing. Now you're down the path of, I don't understand what's happening versus the path of, this seems really obvious. Let's just say yes. So that kind of thing, I always tell people, just, short and sweet, to the point, be honest, be polite. Don't be evasive or weird, but don't talk about stuff they're not talking about.
And then in your experience, are they usually approving you or denying you on the spot when you go in for that E2 visa interview?
Yes. Now there are, I think I've had 2 clients go into administrative processing, which is not great because again, they say, oh, what does this mean? And as the attorney, you go, I don't know. And that's a horrible, as attorneys, we want to know. That's why we're attorneys, because we need to know the information and be able to tell people this and understand that. And that's just one of those unfortunate personal hells for everyone because we don't know. What I know kind of historical and just from anecdotal. Sometimes it's as silly as this. You have the same name as somebody that's on a list of U.S. no-nos. And they got to make sure that you're the Patrick Findaro, not this other Patrick Findaro that we don't like for whatever reason, right? Part of some terrorist group, has been convicted of God knows what. Who knows? So they just have to say, okay, so far sounds good, but we need to do a little extra checking. And that extra checking can take up to 6 months. And it drives the clients nutty for obvious reasons. They have no idea what's going on. They've never had this happen before. I've had 7 other visas. Nobody's ever asked me. Everyone in my family was approved. I've had that too, except for me, the applicant. So what do? Nothing. That's the really maddening thing. You wait.
You wait, but say you get approved, you get the yes. Do they then give you your passport back with the stamp on the spot, or do you come back a week later? It just depends.
Yeah, so usually when you fill out the form online, where you pay your fees and stuff, they'll say, where do you want this passport mailed? So what happens is you go in, you answer the questions. In 98% of the cases, they go, oh, you're approved, or oh, you're denied. If you're approved, they keep the passports, everyone in your family. You go pay a visa reciprocity fee at the end of the haul, depending on where you're from. Some people have no extra fees. Some people, Canada has $40. Australia has $3,500 per person. So whatever, you go pay that fee, you bring the receipt back, then you go home. Then about a week later, you can either pick it up at like a FedEx kind of central hub, or they'll mail it to you, or whatever. So you kind of pick the location. Usually you get it within about a week. And then once you get those passports, you book those flights and head on over.
Yeah. And God forbid you're denied. Do they let you know the reason of your denial?
Sometimes no. So it depends a lot on, sometimes they will give you a sheet of paper. So if you fit into a denial that says, hey, we just don't see that you meet the requirements of the E2 visa, that's actually the best type of denial. Because then we're like, oh, okay, they will usually tell you that. We don't understand where your source of funds came from. This is too confusing, what have you. So in that instance,
you can overcome. We've had that with substantial investment. One of our clients tried to apply with $42,000 invested, and he had to clear the 300K threshold and got approved the second time.
Yes, exactly. So those are the best. I mean, you don't want a denial, but those are the best because they will usually tell you, we don't think you meet this requirement or this one. So now you got to go back and get more documents. But if you can show them the second time, you can get it. The second is, hey, the business is fine, no problem. You're the problem. You lied to us. You overstayed visas. You were arrested for this and that. You blah, 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 blah. So you, the individual, are inadmissible. The business is fine, no problem there. You're the problem. Those are more difficult to overcome. However, in most cases, so I've had a couple of waiver cases. In most cases, people know that already. Like, oh, I was convicted of this and whatever, and whatever. So it can be overcome. You will need some sort of waiver, and there's usually more time to process the visa. But it can be overcome. I've had that done. An Australian client who had a pretty gnarly drug situation in her past, but I did not write the waiver. She had another attorney write the waiver. We were able to prepare the documents and all of that, and she ended up getting the E2. So it can work out, but you need to kind of know that up front. And then there's the other one
with Angie or whichever immigration attorney you choose, because I've seen some cases where it comes out too late, and it's not good for anyone involved.
That's right. And it really, they usually will give you like an opportunity. I did have somebody who had a DUI and never disclosed that to me, and went to the interview, and they asked her about it, and she said, okay, yeah, I did get the DUI. She was approved. But had she said, no, I don't know what you're talking about, no DUI, that would have been major problem. That would have been a denial for sure, because they know. Just also know this, they know everything. You think, oh, they could never possibly, that was 20 years ago, and that was just one thing, and 100% they know. 100% they know. So just keep that in mind. If you're like, and when the attorney or when Patrick, I know you guys do some kind of background stuff. Oh yeah, well, I was only 17 and I spent 2 days in jail and then it kind of never became anything. Yes, that counts. As were you ever arrested? That is an arrest. That counts. It doesn't mean you can't get the visa, but what it means is if you don't talk about that or you say, no, it never happened, now you can't get the visa. So always know that. But that's rare.
Be transparent with your advisors, because if Angie and I can't help with a particular circumstance, then we can bring in an expert to help get you here to the U.S.
Yeah, that's right. So just be honest always, because being honest, even if you've got some kind of rough stuff, will be better than lying about it for 100%. Yes.
So Angie, we have a couple questions. First off, for Maria, can I open my business in the U.S. to apply for the E2 visa?
Can I open my business in the U.S.?
So
yes.
I guess bringing Maria's business from whatever country she's from.
Oh, yeah, definitely. Yeah, I mean, you can really do any type of business. I mean, you can do a franchise. It's great if you already have an existing business. There's also an interesting thing, Patrick, you and I were talking about it off the air maybe a little bit before, which is an E1 visa, depending on where you're from, which is to say, hey, I already have this business in Canada or France or wherever. And I have a lot of U.S. clients, and I'm selling a lot of my goods, services, what have you, to the United States. That's a separate type of visa, but that's an option too. So you can always keep that business. But yes, if you're like, oh, I have this business and it's in Argentina and I kind of want to do the same thing in the U.S., for sure. You can either keep the business in Argentina or drop that one, do something similar here, do something exactly like that here. 100%. Yes.
And then another one, can I get the green card after applying for an E2 visa?
Yes, but not via the E2 visa, meaning, yes, you can get a green card, but you're going to have to maneuver a little bit. So the E2 itself never becomes a green card. You can have an E2 and it is renewable indefinitely. So you could renew for the next 40 years, as long as you and the business still meet all the requirements. That's not a problem, but it will never, even at the end of 40 years, if you sell it, it's over. Party's over. Got to go home. So if you want to have a green card, you definitely can do that. And there's a lot of people who can talk about a lot of different ways to get a green card, but you'll have to do a little maneuvering, not through the E2. You'll need to switch to a different type of visa, an EB2, an EB1. Sometimes people come over and their spouse, which is something that happened within the last 12 months, spouses now can work. They are authorized to work upon entry. to the United States, which was not the case before. So the spouse gets a job because the spouse can work anywhere they want, right? And do anything they want, start their own business, work for your business, work anywhere they want, whatever. So sometimes the spouse will get a job somewhere that says, oh my gosh, you are amazing. We cannot let you go. And you go, well, because you sponsor me for a green card. Yes, I can. Now the E2 applicant can get the green card through the spouse's work.
Lot with the EB3 and EB2. And we've had very few clients over the last 7 or 8 years that actually renewed the E2 visa, because most of them end up getting the green card some way. There's some exception with those born in India, as it's just backlogged with a lot of different green card categories.
Yes.
But as anyone else born in any other country, essentially, there's a lot of different ways to get a green card, and there's a lot of content that we've produced on that. But Bar had a question. I'm interested to know what businesses are eligible for the E2 visa. Tax preparation business can get the E2 visa. How much will be minimum investment required in attorney fees, etc.? So just from like a franchise business or independent business, yeah, sure, it's eligible for the E2 visa. Just need to make sure that you invest a substantial amount and that the business plan shows, that you're going to make a good livelihood from this business.
That's right. And in fact, Patrick, I think we did talk about a tax preparation business at the very beginning of this. So yeah, you can. Okay, now you're going to have to answer this question. Is H&R Block, is that a franchise?
H&R Block, I would not recommend it. They've closed 700 locations over the last 3 years. So I don't even think they work with E2 visa nationals. But there's some other tax franchises that are more on the up and that have innovated more and that are more solid businesses than H&R Block.
That's awesome. So, H&R Block. See, this is why I'm an idiot. Just deal with Patrick on all of this.
But it's a big brand that people know, similar to Subway, where it was once in the past a great business, but it's already kind of hit a trough and sadly is on a downward trajectory. It's
doing something else. Yeah. So I'm sure there are tax preparation franchises. You could open your own, anything that you get into that, in some ways, the franchise might be better than opening your own, just depending on your background, because however you are spinning it, you can't just, you need to have licenses to do some of this stuff, So in some instances, if you're going to be doing something that's even pseudo legal, not 100%, but kind of in that area, it might be wise to do something more on the franchise level. But to answer the question, yes, this is what I tell people. As long as it is legal and you do not have the tax designation of nonprofit, those are your two. That you cannot do anything there. Everything else is possible.
And then we have a question from Fer Martinez that I'll handle. What franchise do you recommend investing in for an E2 visa? Ones that make money simply, and that you can recoup your capital fast. So depending on who you are, what your skill set is, how much capital you can allocate for the business, there's going to be a lot of different franchise opportunities. But out of 10 clients, 8 of them invested in different concepts. And I think Angie, with our clients that we've had together, I don't know if a single one has invested in the same franchise.
No, that's a really good question. I don't think so. They're all over the board. Now, Patrick's for sure the expert. I know nothing about any of them. All I will say is that if you do something that's a little bit more service-based, like what we were talking about earlier, like the home health or something, from an immigration perspective, sometimes it's just faster because you don't have to come up with that retail space. And sometimes that just takes a long time, and it takes a lot of money too. But if that is what you want, that's what I always tell everyone. If your goal is the E2, pick something that's faster and cheaper. If the goal is, I have always wanted to run this type of franchise and this is my dream, then do that. That's totally fine. It really depends on your goals. But so Patrick knows a lot more about the franchises, but as far as what works, what doesn't, almost anything works. What's your goal? What's your spend? What's your timeline?
So it's your business goal combined with your immigration goal, and that will in effect determine what the best business is for you.
That's right. 100%.
Angie, any concluding thoughts for those that are looking to move to the US in 2023?
I think you are making an awesome decision, because I think 2023 is our year. 2022, I think everybody kind of got back to normal. 2023 is going to start off that way, which is great. And And I think that as far as, and Patrick, you've probably seen this too, but tell me if I'm right or wrong. Things are, we don't have the weights on like the length of time weights on things anymore. Like I actually just took a tour of the Los Angeles port for this the Mexican American Chamber, and it's like, hey, there's no boats waiting. We are not, so there's not that backlog anymore. Now things are kind of firing on all cylinders. I think that there are just so many opportunities in this moment, even more so, certainly more than when we started 2021, but even more than when we started 2022. And it's all about location, location, location. You're in Florida. I'm in Los Angeles. Florida, I tell everybody, is going to start, the world is starting to tip on the axis of Florida. Everyone's moving to Florida. That's awesome. There are so many opportunities. And this is what I say about LA County to people who live here. I say the same about the United States. Whatever you're into, we have a place for you. You want beaches, you want mountains, you want kind of small town living, you want huge cities. It's all here.
And there's opportunities everywhere. I
That's
think
right.
LA, sometimes our clients will be afraid that it's a high cost, but the businesses are making more money than if you're in Nebraska too. So people earn more money and they spend more money. So there's opportunities throughout the United States, but it's really going to depend on personal and what your business aspirations are.
100%. There's something for you in the United States, no matter who you are, no matter what you want to do. And I think 2023 is just going to be the year of the E2. I really, really do. So many people are coming around to it just because of green card problems. And, we still have the largest economy. I mean, it's just anything's possible. That's really true.
It's a fast solution at the end of the day.
That's right. Yeah.
Well, Angie, I really appreciate having you on. We'll definitely leave your contact information in the YouTube description notes. And thanks again for everyone that attended today's live stream and left comments and questions. Really appreciate it.
Thanks so much, Patrick, and thanks everyone. And I know I speak for Patrick too. Please reach out anytime. We're always around. Patrick and I have known each other for a long time, and we're both very good with email. So anytime.
Appreciate it. Thanks, Angie.
Thank you. Thanks, everybody.